When we hear the word Buddha, most of us think of Siddhartha Gautam, the prince who gave up everything to seek the truth and whose teachings transformed the world. But there is something most people don't realize. Siddhartha was not the first to awaken, and he won't be the last. In fact, the word Buddha isn't just a name, it's a title, a state of deep awakening, and throughout the vast stretch of time, many have walked this path before him, and many more are yet to come. Now the question is, who is a Buddha? The word means the awakened one, someone who has seen the life as it truly is, beyond the illusions and sufferings and the endless chase of desire. It's not about fame or miracles. It's about waking up to a deeper truth. Siddhartha Gautam attained this state through years of suffering, struggle, deep insight, and practice. But he is not the only one. His awakening is just one chapter in a much bigger, timeless story of human potential. In Theravada Buddhism, it is believed that each age of humanity has its own Buddha, someone who rediscovers the path to truth after it has been lost. Siddhartha is the Buddha of our time, but he is not the first. Ancient texts tell us about Buddhas like Kakusandha, Kanakmuni, and Kasappa, and there's more to come. Maitreya, the future Buddha, who will appear when the world forgets the Dharma once again. In Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism, the idea of Buddhahood stretches far beyond one lifetime or one world. These traditions speak of countless Buddhas across space and time, each one embodying a different quality of awakening, each one guiding beings in their own unique way. There's Amitabh, the Buddha of infinite light, who welcomes beings into a pure land of peace. There's Bhai Sajjaguru, the medicine Buddha, who brings healings not just of the body, but of the heart and mind. And then there's Budai, the joyful, pot-bellied figure often seen in temples and homes, sometimes known as Laughing Buddha. While he may look different from the meditating figure we often imagine, many see him as an incarnation of Maitreya, the Buddha yet to come. Each of these Buddhas represents a different path to awakening, showing us that enlightenment isn't one size fits all. There are many ways to wisdom, many faces of compassion, and many doors to liberation. And perhaps most inspiring of all, they show us that enlightenment isn't far away. It's within reach for anyone who seeks it. In the Theravada tradition, the story doesn't begin or end with Siddhartha Gautama. The Theravada tradition preserves stories of 28 Buddhas, each one finding the same truth in their own age. Why does this matter? Because it reminds us that Buddhahood is not limited to one person in history. It's a potential that lives in all of us. These stories are not just cosmic tales from the distant past. They are reminders that awakening is not a miracle meant for a chosen few. It's a real path, open to anyone with the courage to walk on the path of Dharma. The many Buddhas across time remind us that truth, compassion, and freedom are not born by a single life or tradition. They speak to a universal potential, the quiet but powerful truth that deep down each of us carries the seed of enlightenment. So yes, there have been other Buddhas, and there will be more. From ancient times to distant futures, the Buddhas remind us that the path to wisdom never truly disappears. It simply waits to be found again. The Dharma endures, and it always finds its way back. The cycle continues. The story is not over. Explore the incredible life of Siddhartha Gautama, the prince who became the Buddha. This book brings you his story, his teachings, and real life lessons filled with timeless wisdom. It's easy to follow and deeply inspiring. Get your copy now. Just click the link in the description or in the pinned comment below. To truly understand the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, we have to step back in time, over 2500 years, into a world that was alive with change. This wasn't just the beginning of one man's spiritual journey, it was a turning point in India's history. A time when people everywhere were asking big questions about life, purpose, and suffering. Society was shifting, old beliefs were being challenged, and a whole civilization stood on the edge of something new. In the 7th century BC, the Indo-Gangetic plains were rich and fertile. With iron tools, farmers could clear the forests and grow more food than ever before. For the first time, society had extra food, wealth, and free time. This led to booming villages, growing cities, and busy marketplaces filled with traders, artists, and thinkers. India was becoming urban, and it was becoming curious. Life was changing fast, but with all this growth came deeper questions. Is wealth enough? Why do people suffer? What is life really about? As the land flourished, so did the social and political fabric of the region. Nomadic tribes were settling down, and with that came a shift in identity. People no longer saw themselves just as a member of a clan. They now saw themselves as belonging to a place. This gave birth to the Janpads, literally the footholds of the people. Some of these grew into powerful states called Mahajanpads, like Magad, Kaushal, and Avanti. Each had its own way of governing. Some were ruled by kings, while others were early republics, where groups made decisions through discussions. These Mahajanpads became vibrant centers of trade, learning, and spirituality. According to ancient Buddhist texts, like the Anuttara Nikaya, there were 16 such Mahajanpads, each with its own character, ambitions, and spiritual appetite. These places were alive with ideas, debates, and new ways of thinking about the world. The Indian society was organized into 4 main groups or varnas: priests or Brahmins, warriors or Kshatris, merchants or Vaishya, and laborers or Shudras. At the top were the Brahmins, who led rituals and guarded religious knowledge. But as rituals grew more complex and controlled, many began to feel that something was missing. The Varna system felt rigid and unfair. People began asking, are rituals enough? Who decides what's sacred? Can anyone search for truth, or only a few? The Vedic religion, centered on gods like Indra and Agni, and on sacrificial fire rituals, was no longer the only worldview. A wave of questioning swept across the land. Thinkers and seekers began to ask, what is the self? What is death? Why do we suffer? And is there a path to freedom? At the same time, the Shramana movement gained momentum. These were wandering ascetics, men and women who renounced society, wealth, and family to seek liberation. They rejected the Varna system, questioned the authority of Brahmins, and believed that through meditation, austerity, and ethical living, one can break free from the cycle of suffering. It was a time when people were not just asking big questions, they were willing to sacrifice their lives to find the answer. In the middle of this world, so full of change, contradictions, and big questions, a prince was born. His name was Siddhartha. He was the son of a king from the Sakyan clan in the small kingdom of Kapilvastu, situated in the foothills of Himalayas. His early life was wrapped in luxury. His father, hoping to protect him from the challenges of life, shielded him from suffering. But as Siddhartha grew older, life's truth could no longer be hidden. He saw something he had never really faced before: old age, sickness, and death. These three sides shook him deeply and broke the illusion of permanence. The questions that filled the world around him now took root in his soul. And at just 29, Siddhartha made a life-changing choice. He walked away from the palace, his family, his newborn son, even all the comfort and luxury he had ever known. He set out on a journey to find the truth. He became a seeker. For 6 years, he wandered, he meditated, he starved. He practiced extreme austerities. He sought teachers and tested every known path. And then, under a fig tree, in a quiet grove in Uruvela, what we now call as Bodh Gaya, he sat down to meditate one last time. By dawn, he had awakened, not from sleep, but from ignorance. He had become the Buddha, the awakened one. His insight was as simple as it was profound. Suffering exists, but there is a path to its end. It does not lie in rituals, nor in extremes, but in mindful living, ethical conduct, and deep inner awareness. The Buddha's voice rose in a world that was ready to listen. His teachings were not just for kings or priests, they were for anyone who truly wanted to understand, anyone with an open heart and mind. In a time of division and orthodoxy, he offered a middle path. In the age of questions, he brought clarity. And for the last 2500 years, that clarity has continued to guide millions. This is the story of the Buddha, and this is just the beginning. Explore the incredible life of Siddhartha Gautama, the prince who became the Buddha. This book brings you his story, his teachings, and real-life lessons filled with timeless wisdom. It's easy to follow and deeply inspiring. Get your copy now. Just click the link in the description or in the pinned comment below. Over 2600 years ago, in the Himalayan foothills of present-day Nepal, something extraordinary happened. In the sacred grove of Lumbini, beneath a blooming Ashoka tree, a child was born, Siddhartha Gautama, the one who would become the Buddha. Siddhartha was born into a peaceful, yet deeply spiritual world. His father, King Suddhodana, ruled the small but flourishing Sakya kingdom of Kapilvastu, tucked away between the mighty kingdoms of Kaushal and Magad. Though small, the kingdom was stable, respected, and rich in culture and wisdom. His mother, Queen Mahamaya, was the princess of the nearby Kolya kingdom of Devdaha. But the story of Siddhartha's birth does not begin in Lumbini. It begins far beyond the earth, in the celestial realm of Tushita heaven, as per the ancient Buddhist texts. Before his birth, Siddhartha was a bodhisattva, one who had vowed to attain enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Over countless lifetimes, He had nurtured wisdom, compassion, and patience, preparing for his final journey. When the time was right, he looked down from the Tushita heaven and asked, was the world ready? Was the land fertile for truth? Were his future parents pure of heart? When all the answers aligned, he chose Queen Mahamaya and King Suddhodana. At the stroke of midnight, Queen Mahamaya had a dream unlike any other. A radiant white elephant with 6 tusks descended from the heavens, circled her 3 times, and gently entered her womb. That same night, she dreamt of flying through the skies, climbing a great mountain, and being honored by countless people. The next morning, she shared her dreams with King Suddhodana, who immediately summoned the astrologers to interpret her dream. Their message was clear. This child would be no ordinary prince. If he chose to stay in the world, he would become a universal monarch, a great ruler. But if he renounced the world and became an ascetic, he would become a Buddha, a fully enlightened being. According to Sakyan tradition, Mahamaya traveled to her parental home in Devadaha to give birth. Along the way, she stopped to rest in the serene and blooming Lumini Grove, filled with blossoming trees and bird song. She took bath in the cool waters of the Pushkarini pond nearby. There, while standing under the shade of a flowering Ashoka tree, she gave birth, holding a branch with one hand, calm and serene. Celestial music filled the air, and divine beings gathered in wonder. It is said that even Saka, the king of gods, descended from heaven to receive the newborn prince. And then something even more astonishing took place. The infant prince stood up, took 7 steps, and with each step, a lotus bloomed beneath his feet. He looked to the 4 directions, north, south, east, and west, and made a proclamation that echoed through the heavens. This is my final birth. I will not be born again. The universe rejoiced, and divine beings celebrated the arrival of one who would guide humanity out of the endless cycle of suffering. The joyful procession returned to Kapilvastu, where the kingdom celebrated with music, gifts, and blessings. On the 5th day, the court astrologers gathered for the naming ceremony. The child was named Siddhartha, which means the one who fulfills every wish. But soon, joy gave way to sorrow. Just 7 days after giving birth, Queen Mahamaya passed away. Her departure, though deeply mourned, was not unexpected. It was seen not as a tragedy, but as a part of divine pattern. The fate shared by the mothers of all Buddhas. Siddhartha was then raised by her younger sister, Mahaprajapati Gautami, who loved and nurtured him as her own son. Years later, she would become the first woman ordained into the Buddhist monastic order, the Sangha. And so, the journey of Siddhartha began. This was no ordinary birth. It was dawn of a great awakening, one that would light the path for generations, across cultures and centuries. The Buddha had been born, and the world would never be the same again. Deep in the forest, the venerable sage Asita sat in quiet meditation. Long ago, he had served as royal advisor and teacher to King Suddhodana. But now, Asita spent his final years in quiet solitude, his life devoted to inner contemplation. As he finished his meditation, one morning, he noticed a strange glow in the air around him. Celestial music filled the sky, and heavenly beings danced with joy. Curious, Asita asked the Devas, why such celebrations in the heavens? The Bodhisattva has been born, they replied. one who will become the Buddha, has entered the human world. Moved by this revelation, he made the journey to Kapilvastu without any delay. The king and queen were stunned and honored by the sudden arrival of the great ascetic. "What brings you here, O Holy One?" the king Suddhodana asked with deep respect. "I have seen signs," Asita replied, "and I believe your child is the cause of these celestial celebrations." Eagerly, the king brought the young prince to the sage so that the child could be blessed by him. But to the surprise of all, the legs of the child moved and rested on the matted locks of the ascetic. Rather than being offended, Asita rose from his seat and saluted the child with his folded hands, recognizing this as a sign of extraordinary destiny. The ascetic kept on staring at the child in silence for a long time. Looking closely, he saw the 32 marks of a Mahapurusha, a great man. He looked sadly up at the sky. Tears filled his eyes, and he began to cry. Alarmed, the king asked, "Is something wrong?" "No," said Asita, smiling through his tears. "This child is destined to become either a great monarch or a fully enlightened Buddha. But I weep because I will not live long enough to hear the supreme truth from the Buddha, and will not be able to benefit from the ultimate wisdom of the Buddha, as I will die long before he attains Buddhahood. I have spent my whole life seeking the truth he will one day reveal." He offered his blessings, and taking one long last look at the baby Siddhartha, slowly left the palace. King Shuddhodana watched him leave and then turned towards the prince. The king could not help but wonder, would his son rule the world or renounce it to transform it forever? Explore the incredible life of Siddhartha Gautama, the prince who became the Buddha. This book brings you his story, his teachings, and real-life lessons filled with timeless wisdom. It's easy to follow and deeply inspiring. Get your copy now. Just click the link in the description or in the pinned comment below. From the very beginning, it was clear that Siddhartha Gautama was no ordinary child. Born in the Sakyan city of Kapilvastu to King Suddhodana and Queen Maya, his birth was celebrated across the kingdom with great joy and reverence. The astrologers predicted that he would grow up to be either a great king or a great spiritual teacher, a prophecy that shaped much of his early life. Surrounded by luxury, music, gardens, and marble palaces, the childhood of the young prince seemed perfect in every way. Yet beneath this comfort lay a mind that was already searching for deeper meaning. Even as a child, Siddhartha stood out among his peers. His tall and graceful figure, radiant face, and gentle speech earned him admiration from everyone who met him. But it wasn't his royal demeanor alone that made him special. It was his compassion. While other royal children took delight in games, hunting, and displays of power, Siddhartha found joy in gentleness. He could often be seen sitting quietly in the palace gardens, lost in the beauty of blooming flowers or the song of birds. He cared deeply for animals and disliked seeing any creature harmed. The palace attendants often told stories of how the young prince would rescue wounded birds or free captured animals, unable to bear the sight of suffering even in the smallest form. At the age of 8, Siddhartha began his formal education. The best tutors from across the land were brought to the palace to teach him. Under their guidance, he mastered a wide range of subjects: literature, philosophy, mathematics, science, languages, and religious studies, and quickly absorbed their wisdom. His teachers often found themselves astonished by his intelligence. In one story, when his writing teacher presented him with a tablet, Siddhartha began listing all 64 forms of writing known at that time. A feat that left his teachers speechless. His mind was sharp, curious, and endlessly questioning. But education for a prince also meant physical training. Siddhartha was a member of the Kshatriya or warrior clan of Sakyas and was expected to excel in martial arts. He learned archery, swordmanship, horse riding, and wrestling, and excelled in all of them. Legends say that during one archery contest, he drew a bow so powerfully that he broke it, and when given an ancient one as the replacement, his arrow flew so far it struck a tree miles away. Despite his strength and skill, he remained humble and kind. Victory never filled him with pride, and failure never led to anger. His calm spirit and quiet confidence impressed everyone around him. King Suddhodana wanted his son to become a great ruler, a universal monarch who would bring peace and prosperity to the world. To protect him from life's sorrows, the king made sure that Siddhartha was surrounded by pleasure and beauty at all times. The prince lived in palaces designed for each season: cool halls for summer, warm chambers for winter, and flower-filled terraces for spring. Musicians, dancers, and attendants ensured he never experienced discomfort or sadness. But even in this sheltered world, Siddhartha's heart remained curious and contemplative. He would often sit in silence, watching the changing clouds or the flicker of a lamp, quietly reflecting on the mysteries of life. Those who knew him sensed that Siddhartha was destined for something beyond kingship. His compassion, intelligence, and deep sense of peace hinted at a spiritual depth far greater than his years. While the world saw a prince enjoying every luxury, within him was growing a seeker, one who would one day leave behind the glittering palace walls to search for the truth that would bring peace not just to himself but to all of humanity. Siddhartha's childhood was the perfect balance of royal splendor and quiet reflection. It laid the foundation for his later awakening, a journey that would transform him from a prince surrounded by gold into the Buddha, the enlightened one, whose wisdom would light the path for millions across centuries. When Siddhartha was around 9 years old, an event took place that would quietly shape the course of his life: the Royal Plowing Festival. This was one of the grandest events in the kingdom of Kapilvastu. Nobles, farmers, and townspeople gathered together to mark the beginning of the sowing season. The air was filled with the rhythm of drums, the chanting of priests, and the joyful excitement of new beginnings. King Suddhodana, dressed in his royal robes, led the ceremony by guiding the first golden plough through the soft, freshly turned earth. Amid the celebration, young Siddhartha watched everything with thoughtful eyes. The scene before him was festive, yet what he noticed was not the grandness, splendor, or the laughter, but the quiet suffering hidden beneath it. As the heavy ploughs cut through the soil, he saw tiny insects and worms crushed and scattered. Nearby, the farmers worked hard under the burning sun, their skin shining with sweat as they pushed the oxen to keep moving. A lizard ran out quickly, only to be caught by a snake, which moments later was seized by a hawk. Life, he realized, was full of struggle and pain, where one being's survival came at the cost of another's. Feeling a deep sadness and compassion for all living creatures, Siddhartha stepped away from the crowd and found shade under a rose apple tree. The tree's broad leaves shielded him from the blazing sun, and the air beneath was calm and cool. Sitting cross-legged, he closed his eyes and began to focus on his breath. Slowly, his mind grew quiet, his thoughts faded, and his heart was filled with peace. Without anyone teaching him, the young prince naturally entered a deep meditative state, what would later be known as the first dhyana, or meditative absorption. The world around him seemed to pause. The sounds of the festival faded into the distance. Even the shadow of the rose apple tree, it is said, remained still and unmoving, as if nature itself bowed in reverence to his inner stillness. When the attendants realized Siddhartha was missing, they rushed to find him and were amazed by what they saw. The prince, sitting motionless, serene like a golden statue, his face calm and radiant. They ran to inform King Suddhodana, who hurried to the spot. As he looked upon his son, awe and fear filled his heart. The old prophecy whispered in his mind that his son would one day renounce the world to seek enlightenment. The king's pride in his son's spiritual depth was mixed with fear of losing him. Yet, he could not help but bow his head in respect. Before him sat not just a child, but a soul touched by something vast and timeless. This quiet moment under the rose apple tree was the first glimpse of the great awakening that lay ahead. It revealed Siddhartha's natural compassion, his sensitivity to suffering, and his gift for deep meditation, qualities that would one day lead him to become the Buddha. Long before he left the palace or met any teacher, the young prince had already begun his journey inward. A journey that started in the quiet peace under a humble rose apple tree. Long before Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha, his kind and gentle nature could already be seen. One of the most touching stories from his childhood is about a wounded swan, a story that shows how deeply he cared for all living beings. One bright morning, young Prince Siddhartha was walking in the palace garden, enjoying the beauty of flowers and watching swans fly across the sky. He loved animals and often spent hours quietly observing them. Suddenly, he heard a sharp cry. A white swan came falling from the sky, flapping its wings helplessly before landing on the grass. Siddhartha ran toward it and saw that an arrow had pierced its wing. Kneeling beside the bird, he gently pulled out the arrow and whispered softly, "Don't be afraid." He cleaned the wound with herbs and tore a piece of his robe to wrap around it. Slowly, the frightened bird began to calm down in his hands. Just then, his cousin Devdatta came running up with a bow in his hand. "That's my swan," he shouted. "I shot it down, so it belongs to me." Siddhartha looked at him calmly and said, "You only hurt it. I saved its life. It should belong to the one who wants it to live, not to the one who tried to kill it." Devdatta was angry. "That's not fair. The hunter always owns what he shoots." "Then let's ask the wise men of the court," Siddhartha suggested gently. They went before the king and his ministers. Devdatta spoke first, saying the swan was his because he had shot it. Siddhartha said, "This swan is alive. It wants to be free, not owned. Life belongs to those who protect it, not to those who harm it." The court fell silent. Then a wise old man said, "A life cannot belong to the one who tries to destroy it. It belongs to the one who saves it." Everyone agreed, and the king gave the swan to Siddhartha. Siddhartha cared for the bird until it was completely healed. Then, one morning, he carried it outside in the palace garden and opened his hands. "Go, my friend," he said with a smile. "You are free. You belong to no one." The swan spread its wings and soared into the blue sky. This simple story shows the true heart of Siddhartha, the heart of Bodhisattva. Even as a child, he understood that all living beings wish to live in peace and free. His compassion made him see beyond rules and ownership. The story of Buddha and the swan reminds us that love and compassion are the highest forms of wisdom, and that every life, no matter how small, deserves kindness and protection. Explore the incredible life of Siddhartha Gautama, the prince who became the Buddha. This book brings you his story, his teachings, and real-life lessons filled with timeless wisdom. It's easy to follow and deeply inspiring. Get your copy now. Just click the link in the description or in the pinned comment below. From the day Prince Siddhartha was born, his father, King Suddhodana, carried both pride and fear in his heart. Wise sages had foretold two possible futures for the young prince. He would either become a great ruler who conquered the world, or a holy man who renounced everything to seek the truth and bring peace to humanity. For the king, the idea of his only son abandoning the throne was unbearable. He wanted a ruler, not a monk. So, he made a decision. Siddhartha will never see anything that might awaken a desire to renounce worldly life. Determined to protect his son from his perceived dangers of spirituality, King Suddhodana built for him a world of perfect beauty, a palace that sparkled like a dream, where pain and sorrow did not exist. Everything that could cause discomfort or raise difficult questions about life was carefully removed from the sight of the prince. The king believed that if Siddhartha never saw suffering, he would never think of seeking its cause or its end. Siddhartha's childhood became one of endless luxury and pleasure. He lived among fountains, gardens, and halls decorated with gold and silver. Every flower in the royal gardens was replaced before it began to wilt. The air was filled with music, laughter, and the sweet smell of jasmine. His robes were woven from the finest silk. His meals prepared by the best cooks. And his companions were young, healthy, and cheerful, carefully chosen to keep the illusion of the existence of a perfect world. The king even built 3 magnificent palaces for Siddhartha, one for each season, so that the prince could never experience discomfort from heat, cold, or rain. Within these golden walls, life was a festival of pleasures. Yet, behind all the splendor lay a quiet fear, the king's desperate attempt to outwit destiny. He wanted to keep the prince content, unaware that no amount of comfort can silence the call of truth once it begins to stir in the heart. Though surrounded by every luxury, Siddhartha's heart was different. Even in his youth, he did not find joy in endless celebrations or entertainments. There was a quiet wisdom in his eyes, a stillness that worried his father. The king remembered the prophecy and grew anxious. What if the pleasures of the palace could not hold his son forever? What if Siddhartha's mind began to wander towards questions no wealth could answer? And yet, despite all the precautions, the seeds of awakening were already within Siddhartha. The palace, for all its gold and beauty, was nothing more than a gilded cage. Bright on the outside, but hollow within. The prince had everything the world could offer. Yet, deep inside, he felt something was missing. King Suddhodana tried to protect Siddhartha from the truth of life, from old age, sickness, and death. But truth cannot be hidden forever. The walls of illusion, no matter how high, eventually crack, and one day Siddhartha would step beyond them, beginning a journey that would change not just his life, but the fate of the world itself. When Prince Siddhartha turned 16, his life seemed to step into a chapter of pure joy and promise. Kapilvastu was alive with celebration. The young prince was to marry his cousin, the graceful and wise princess Yashodhara, daughter of King Dandapani of the Kolia clan. The two shared not only royal blood, but even the same birthday, as if fate itself had joined their paths. To find a worthy husband for his daughter, King Dandapani announced a grand competition, a magnificent royal event where princes from across neighboring kingdoms arrived to showcase their strength and skill. The fields of Devdaha echoed with the sounds of galloping horses, clanking weapons, and cheering crowds. Every prince sought to impress the king and win the hand of Princess Yashodhara. Among all the excited warriors showing off their strength, Siddhartha stood out, not because of arrogance or show off, but because of his peaceful and gentle presence. When asked to tame a wild horse, he didn't raise a whip or shout. He simply approached it gently, speaking in a soothing voice. The animal soon calmed and bowed its head. The crowd was amazed, and from her seat, Yashoda felt her heart move. Here was a prince who conquered not with power, but with compassion. Then came the test of archery. In front of the contestants rested a mighty bow, so huge and heavy that no other prince had managed to even lift it. When Siddhartha's turn arrived, he picked it up effortlessly, his movement calm and unhurried. He drew the string and with one steady motion released the arrow. It flew so far, it struck a distant tree, where, it said, a spring of water began to flow, later called the well of the arrow. King Dandapani rose proudly and declared, "No one is more worthy of my daughter than Prince Siddhartha of Kapilvastu." Their wedding was a sight to behold. The scent of jasmine filled the air, music echoed through the palace halls, and golden lamps lined the streets. The people rejoiced, certain their beloved prince had found both love and happiness. Siddhartha and Yashoda, barely 16, stood together beneath a canopy of flowers, radiant with youthful grace, beginning a bond built on tenderness, trust, and quiet understanding. King Suddhodana, Siddhartha's father, was overjoyed. He believed that marriage would anchor his son to the duties of kingship and worldly life, keeping him far from any thoughts of renunciation. To make sure his son never experienced sorrow or discomfort, he ordered the construction of 3 magnificent palaces, one for summer, one for winter, and one for the rainy season. These palaces were adorned with marble floors, lotus ponds, and fragrant gardens filled with blooming flowers. Skilled musicians played day and night, and graceful dancers filled the air with beauty and joy. Only the young, healthy, and cheerful were allowed inside. No sight of suffering, sickness, or aging was ever permitted near the prince. And so, Siddhartha and Yashoda lived surrounded by music, beauty, and laughter. Yashoda's wisdom and kindness matched Siddhartha's gentle nature perfectly. They walked through moonlit gardens and shared gentle moments together. Yet, even amid all this perfection, Siddhartha sometimes felt a quiet unease, a question rising deep within. Is this all what life is truly about? He had everything one could dream of, and yet his eyes often drifted beyond the palace walls, as if searching for something unseen. 13 peaceful years passed. When Siddhartha was 29, joy once again filled the palace. Yashoda had given birth to a son. The kingdom celebrated, believing fatherhood would finally tie the prince firmly to the worldly life. But when Siddhartha heard the news, he smiled softly and whispered, "A fetter has been born." His words puzzled those around him. Yet they were spoken not with sadness, but with deep understanding. He saw in this new bond of love both the beauty and the weight of attachment, the ties that connect all beings. to the endless cycle of joy and sorrow. That night, as moonlight filled the palace, Siddhartha walked to Yashodra's chamber. Through the half-open door, he saw her sleeping beside their newborn. The soft glow of the lamp lit their peaceful faces. His heart swelled with love, yet he did not enter. Something within him told him that one touch, one glance, could bind him forever to the comforts and attachments he was beginning to question. So he simply stood there, gazing at the two people he loved most in the world. Then he turned away, his heart full of both love and longing for something beyond. Something was awakening within him, a call, gentle, yet impossible to ignore. The marriage of Siddhartha and Yashodhara was more than a royal union. It was the meeting of two souls, one rooted in love, the other awakening to truth. Yashodhara's devotion and Siddhartha's quest remind us that sometimes love must learn to let go, not out of indifference, but out of compassion vast enough to embrace the whole world. Beyond the palace walls, destiny waited, ready to change everything. Explore the incredible life of Siddhartha Gautama, the prince who became the Buddha. This book brings you his story, his teachings, and real-life lessons filled with timeless wisdom. It's easy to follow and deeply inspiring. Get your copy now. Just click the link in the description or in the pinned comment below.